Oh, Amazon's here. I don't think I ordered anything, but maybe I did. Hey guys, it's Olivia and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Olivia, I'm 25 years old and I was recently diagnosed with autism as an adult. So here at my channel, I try to make videos informing people about what females on the spectrum look like, because oftentimes we don't fit the typical autistic image. Just real quick before we jump into this week's video, if you hear any loud breathing or snoring or groans or weird noises, my dog Blue is sitting on the bed next to me. He had surgery a couple days ago, so he's just chilling, being a huge baby while I make this video. So for this week's video of Autistically Me, I'm going to do it on my diagnosis journey. A ton of people have asked me on YouTube and on Instagram about my diagnosis journey, how I went about getting diagnosed, what it was like, and is it worth getting a diagnosis as an adult? So I thought I would cover all those topics in this week's video. I'm not sure if this is a super interesting story or not, so if it's boring, I apologize, but it seems that it's been very requested, so I thought I would do it for you guys. So jumping in, how did it start? Well, about 2.5 years ago is when I first was tipped off, or I don't know if that's the right word, that I could be autistic. I was up in Washington State for a friend's college graduation, and at dinner I was sitting across from her aunt, and at dinner I was babbling about my whole life story, which I do a lot, which is apparently an autistic trait. We can't shut up, and we have no personal boundaries or anything, so I'm talking about all my mental health issues and all this stuff, and literally my whole life story. I can't tell a short story, it's impossible for me, so this video is probably gonna be long also, FYI. But so the aunt is sitting there and she's really looking at me, and I notice this briefly because I don't really make eye contact when I'm talking, but I noticed this briefly, and then when I was done telling my super long unshortened version of my life, she asked if she could ask me a question, and I got really nervous and I was like, oh my gosh, did I say something wrong? Did I upset her? And of course my brain goes super negative, and I felt like I was getting summoned to the principal's office or something like that when I was younger. And she said, don't get offended, but have you ever been tested for autism? And I absolutely wasn't offended because, as I mentioned in my last video, nothing really offends me ever. So I was curious that she would bring that up, because I kind of knew what autism was. At the time, I had an autistic young man working for me at my small business. When she brought that up, I thought of him, and I was nothing like him. I was very intrigued, and I love learning new things, and so I was super like, oh my gosh, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What, I could be autistic? Well, no, I can't. And so she said she has a daughter who was 17 at the time, I think, 5 years younger than me, and she said she was just recently diagnosed with autism, and that autism is often not diagnosed in females because they portray symptoms differently than the stereotypical autistic symptoms that people think of, and so they often get misdiagnosed with mental illnesses instead of autism. And so that really fit my life story anyways, and so she just said, maybe you want to look it up. And so of course, my autistic brain getting obsessed with things and having special interest, I dove headfirst 1,000% into researching autism in females. So when I got back to the hotel that night, I was on my phone up till 1:30 in the morning, even though I had to get up early for my flight back home, researching autism in females. And wow, was it like reading a checklist of my life. It was like, oh my gosh, me. And it was this crazy validating feeling that I could be onto something. As soon as I got home, I was seeing my weekly therapist in a couple of days. So I was super excited to bring this up to her and tell her all these newfound traits that I share with autism in females. And so I was just really excited to go, and I got there and I became really nervous about bringing it up, and I didn't gather enough courage to bring it up to her until like 5 minutes left in the session. And when I brought it up, she immediately shut me down. She said, absolutely not. And I was absolutely mortified. I was so embarrassed to the point where I thought I was gonna have to find a new therapist, because I was like, I can't show my face in here ever again. How could I be so wrong? Oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing. How could I think I had this when clearly there's literally no possible way I could have it? I was super disappointed, and I felt like I got my hopes up because I thought I was maybe onto something. I stopped researching, I stopped looking into it. I just tried to get it out of my head, which was hard because I was very into it and obsessed with it, even though it had only been a couple days. But I tried to just move on and not think about it. Then a couple months later, I was talking to a very good friend of mine, Todd, who happens to be a therapist as well. And so I brought it up to him, and he had a very similar reaction. He's like, oh, there's no way. You can have a conversation, you're very social. But because I know Todd much better than I knew my therapist, and he was a close friend, I pushed him on the issue. He was talking about how somebody would get diagnosed with autism, because I had asked, and he's like, well, you know, there's like a book and you have traits or symptoms about somebody getting diagnosed with anything, and if they like meet enough of the criteria or traits, then they have said whatever. Then I asked, are the traits weighted? Because if I have all these other traits but I can communicate seemingly fine, does that mean I don't have it? And he said, no, the traits aren't weighted. So yeah, that would mean you would have it. That gave me a glimmer of hope. Another couple months went by, and I brought it up to my mom, and I was nervous to bring it up to her because I didn't want her to maybe get offended or something, or get defensive, like, oh no, like there's nothing wrong with you, something like that. To my surprise, when I brought it up, she was actually super intrigued, like I was when my friend's aunt brought it up. We started talking, and she was sharing stories with me from when I was a kid that I'll talk about in another episode of Autistically Me, and it started making sense to her. And so she bought some books and looked into it, and she was really on board and fascinated with it like me. So I was kind of going to diagnose myself and self-diagnose, but because two people who are in the medical field and whom I really trust their opinion said there's absolutely no way you could be autistic, there was a little voice in my head that said, no, you're faking it. I again kind of stopped trying to look into it and tried to just move on with my life. So fast forward a year, my mom is up for my birthday in Los Angeles from San Diego, and we're out to breakfast, and she brought up autism. And I forget exactly why she brought it up. I think it was something like she was trying to explain how I worked to my little sister. And so I hadn't thought about ASD in a really long time. From time to time, it would pop in my head, but I just was like, no, it's a dead end, don't look into it. When she said this, I asked her, do you think I have it? And she said 100%. Just like that, like really fast, like didn't have to think about it. She just said 100%. And it surprised me because she was so sure that I had this. Like there was no doubt in her mind. That re-energized me, and that day I went and started researching how to get diagnosed as an adult. Found a lot of dead ends with that because a lot of places only diagnose children. After I hit the dead ends, I finally found this website online that I'll link down below in the description that was basically a directory of doctors who specialize in adult autism diagnosis. I don't think that's right. I can't say the word. I've tried to say it many times and many takes, and I can't say it. So it's specialized in autism diagnoses. I don't know if that's a word, but we're just gonna roll with it, by state in the United States. And so I looked up California, and lo and behold, there was a doctor 0.8 miles away from my apartment. And not only that, it was the same building my weekly therapist was in. I thought, oh my gosh, he specializes in adults, but I was still nervous because I didn't know if he knew about females on the spectrum. I got an appointment with him within a week. I think this is because, I'm not sure, but it was a private practice of his. And so and I was paying out of pocket. My insurance didn't cover it, so I didn't need to like go through them. So I'm not sure if that's why the process was so quick. I know a lot of people sometimes have to wait 3 years to get a diagnosis or an appointment to try to get a diagnosis. So being able to get my appointment in a week was a very big blessing. And I know that if I would have had to wait 3 years, I would have gone crazy not knowing, because like I said in my other video, I need to know things. God put this guy, this doctor, less than a mile away from my house. I literally could have walked, but it's Los Angeles, so I did not. For the evaluation itself, my mom accompanied me to it because Dr. Gallo, that was his name, requested it. And he said, you gotta bring your mom because she's the Olivia expert, he called her. He said that she'll be able to remember things from when you're an infant that are very important that you won't be able to remember. So it's very important that you bring her along. When we got there, again, I was nervous because I still didn't know if he knew about females on the spectrum, and I didn't know if I was gonna get my hopes up again, so I was just very nervous about the whole thing. When we got there, he introduced himself, explained that he was actually the main adult diagnostician for autism at the local hospital, and he had done like 5,000 adult diagnoses or something like that. It was crazy. And that he dedicated his life to knowing all about autism, and he'd written books and all this stuff, and he was a super nice, super friendly, super funny guy, really laid back. And he explained that the evaluation is going to take probably 3 hours, and it's just going to be a series of questions and him asking us questions, us telling him stories. There was no questionnaires, which I know a lot of people said they had to fill out. It was all talking. The 3 hours went by pretty quickly, and I actually really enjoyed it. I really enjoy talk therapy, and so it was kind of like a therapy session for me as well, because I got to learn new things from my mom, which I love doing, and I got to babble about my story, which you know I like doing. Like I said, I don't know how to tell a short story, so I had 3 hours to tell this guy my whole life story. It was like perfect for me. So after the 3 hours, I didn't know if he was going to need to take time to, you know, write a report and come to a decision. I didn't know, and I didn't want to ask because I was like, oh, I don't know if that's a stupid question. But my mom asked, she's like, so like, do we have to wait to know, or what's going on? And he said, no. You show symptoms of a female on the autism spectrum, and you absolutely have autism spectrum disorder. My mom immediately starts crying, and I never cry. I'm not emotional. I don't have a lot of empathy. But oh my gosh, was it like the biggest weight lifted off my shoulders. Finally, after 24 years, I had found my answer and my reasoning for why my brain worked the way it worked. It was so validating to know that there was a reason behind the way my brain worked, and I wasn't just some weird, crazy person. It was, I think, so emotional for my mom because she felt so bad that she couldn't figure out what was wrong with me and couldn't get me the help I needed for 24 years. It was just an awesome day, and I immediately went home and posted on Instagram, autistic and proud, because boy, I couldn't have been prouder. It was like I just won the lottery. So that was how I diagnosed. Now let me try to answer, in my personal opinion, the question that I've been getting asked a lot, which is a diagnosis worth it? Now, I think it very much depends on the person. For me, it was absolutely worth it. I absolutely needed it because I was obsessed with figuring myself out. I had asked this lifelong question of why I am the way I am, and autism was that answer and that missing piece that I needed in my life to understand myself. Some people are totally fine self-diagnosing, and I think that's absolutely valid and okay to do. For me, it wasn't okay because of how my brain works, and I have this mean little voice that was saying, oh, you're faking it, and oh, you're not autistic. And so I was never going to be able to fully say like, yes, I am autistic if a professional and doctor hadn't told me that I was. An official diagnosis can also allow you access to help that you may need. So medical services, mental health services, maybe disability, all that kind of stuff. So if you feel that you need that, then yeah, an official diagnosis could be worth it. If you don't need that, then maybe it's not worth it because it could take a really long time, or it could be stressful for you, or it could cost a lot of money like it cost us. You could get a doctor who is ignorant about females on the spectrum and only thinks about males and stereotypical autistic traits, and could, discourage you and say, oh, you're not autistic. And if that happens to you and you want an official diagnosis, please don't give up. Because my therapist said that to me, I waited a year and a half to actually try to get a diagnosis. Granted, when I finally did start to try, it only took a week, but it's still, I wasted a year and a half because one person said no. Don't be afraid if you get told no. I know it's a totally crushing feeling, but try to be strong, try to push through it, and search for somebody who really knows what they're talking about, because unfortunately, a lot of doctors just don't know about females on the spectrum because it's not a widely studied thing as of now. Obviously, we're getting more and more information every day, but it's still widely unknown. So don't give up. There is a doctor for you out there. It just might be hard to find. Thank you guys for listening to me ramble on about my diagnosis story. Can you only imagine how long it took me to tell my whole life story to this doctor? Thanks again. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week with another all new episode of Autistically Me.